Well, just as President Trump gets set to kick off his first trip to Asia, Chinese Communist Party this week affirmed President Xi Jinping's status as the most powerful ruler since Mao Zedong, handing him even greater control over the world's second largest economy and setting the stage for him to dominate politics in that country for decades to come. In a tweet late Wednesday, President Trump said he called Xi to congratulate him on his, quote, extraordinary elevation. The two men also discussing North Korea and trade on that call. Let's bring in author and Asia analyst Gordon Chang. Gordon, I'm old enough to remember Mao Zedong. I was a kid when he was in power, but he was an absolute dictator. He killed millions of people. Is that what's to come here?
Well, in some ways it is. Xi Jinping believes in a state-dominated economy. That's inconsistent with the notions of reform and opening up, which was Deng Xiaoping's policy, Deng being Mao's successor, who really put China on a much better course. You know, Xi Jinping obviously believes in Mao. He talks about him. He makes pilgrimages to Mao places in China. This is not a good thing. And the important issue here is that he's made himself powerful because there is no obvious successor that was chosen at the 19th Communist Party Congress. And that means we could go back to the terrible infighting of the first years of the People's Republic.
Well, you know, a lot of people, including myself, by the way, Gordon, thought that if you liberalize the economy in China the way that it happened after Mao, that the political system would become liberalized as well. And this seems to contradict that.
Well, it certainly does. And what we have seen over the 5 years in Xi Jinping's first term is really the revival of the state sector. You have state monopolies being recreated, and you have more industrial
excuse me for interrupting, but he is going back on the free market changes. He's renationalizing, getting the government back into things that it had gotten out of.
Yeah, there's much more state control in the markets. There are fewer opportunities for foreign companies. They're trying to restrict that in China right now. And that really is a reversal of all the progress that we saw in those 3 decades. So for us, this is going to be a very interesting period. You have President Trump going there, and I think that what he's doing is essentially going to say to Xi Jinping, now that you're in control, you have no excuse not to do certain things that we want, especially North Korea.
What do you think about the president's sort of congratulatory note to President Xi?
I wouldn't do that. This was not a democratic selection of a leader. This really was a coronation on a part of a one-party Leninist state. I just would have stayed away from that entirely.
But at the same time, you know, he's always negotiating, President Trump. And you remember that moment when right before he hit Syria with the Tomahawk missiles, he actually had the president of China with him at dinner, and he kind of told him over a chocolate cake what he was planning to do that night. I think he wants to get the message to the president of China, you can't get away with everything.
Yeah, and that was a very effective display of American diplomacy, because you had Trump saying to Xi Jinping, look, I just attacked your ally, and you can't do anything about it. And I think that unnerved not only Xi Jinping, but the Chinese political establishment. And that was really a good thing, because we saw China move in a better direction for a few months after that, because I think that they had thought that they were able to corral Trump, and after that demonstration of American power, I think that they lost their confidence in that.
There's another demonstration of American power going on right now off the coast of Korea. We have 3 carrier groups. This is unprecedented. I was talking to a general about this who said 2 is extraordinary, but when you have 3 there, it really shows you mean business. That's obviously focused on North Korea, but there's also a message to China, isn't there?
Well, there certainly is, because our diplomacy with regard to North Korea has rightly been focused on China, because China has overwhelming leverage over the North Koreans. And, you know, we saw...
But the message, forgive me, but the message is also kind of, you know, we are the biggest presence in the Pacific. You may be there, you may be right there, but they only have, as I believe, 2 carriers themselves.
They've got 1, which is really a training carrier. You know, 3 American carriers permits 24/7 operations, 365 days a year. And that certainly is a message, not only to the North Koreans, but as you say, to the Chinese, that the United States is willing to use force to solve this.
Is their economy, as a result of the government getting back involved in stuff that it probably shouldn't be, is their economy going to spiral down?
Eventually it will, and now you have a systemic debt crisis on the horizon, because in 2016 there was an unprecedented increase in debt and an unprecedented pace of increase. So, you know, this is something that everyone is starting to talk about. Even the governor of the Chinese central bank talked about a Minsky moment. That's the moment when asset values collapse. We had one in 2000, you know, just before the crisis, right before what we call the Lehman moment. China is heading to the Lehman moment when everything falls apart.
Gordon Chang, good to see you. Thank you very much.